And we need someone like you talking to our population. You get up every day and you look forward to doing what you want to do. So I'm excited that you would bring your story to
Absolutely.
us.
I mean, we dedicate so much time to our work that we have
Yes.
to be in a place where we're passionate,
Absolutely.
where we believe in the values of the organization,
Absolutely.
we trust the people around us,
Yeah.
we like the people around
Yes.
us. We believe in what the company does, right? I
Yes.
believe, Philips, we make among the world's best medical equipment.
Mm-hmm.
We have a mission to improve the lives of 2.5 billion people.
Wow.
Let's go.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I am Dr. Miya Burt-Stewart here at Atlanteans University within the AU studios, and I would like to thank you all for taking the opportunity and taking the time out to join us today. Today in the studios, I have an individual who is no stranger to AU Studios. My good friend, he's a businessman, he's a father, he's a professional, and he's someone that we look forward to having here in the studios at Atlanteans University. And so Daniel Updegraft. Daniel has in the past served as a consultant. We've sat with Daniel and we've talked about opportunities and avenues to become a consultant. And so today, Mr. Updegraft is back with us, and we have expanded our conversation because Daniel has transitioned to that next level. So rather than me tell you everything about that, I will, without further ado, introduce our friend, our family, Daniel Updegraft. Hello, Daniel, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Maya. It is such a privilege to be back with you. This is my second time on the show.
Yes.
I have been at the university previously
Yes.
with some of your classes.
Mhm.
In fact, I'm still in touch with one of your former
Vlad,
students.
I think you
Vlad,
said. Yes,
of course,
yes,
from
I
Serbia.
love Vlad.
I'm doing business in
Yes.
Serbia, but that's not the reason why we're still in touch.
Okay.
We're still in touch because we're friends, right?
Good, good.
He's a very interesting young professional.
Yes. Brilliant
but
young man.
but we're here, I know, to talk about other things, but I wanted to extend my gratitude for inviting me to the show.
Absolutely. We thank you for thinking enough of us that you would take time out to come with us. We know that you travel internationally. You have large global firms that you work with. And so the fact that you would come here to AU Studios and Atlantis University, we appreciate you. And so that will give us a great segue into why we're here today, Daniel. And so I mentioned that you are, in the past, have served as a consultant. You are now a director, still working with global firms, trillion-dollar firms. And so we'd like to talk about that today, have you share with us. As you know, we have students at Atlantis University. Our student population is probably 50 to 60% international, right? Many of them will go back to their own countries to work, and many of them will go to other countries. And so we'd like to, just based on your experience, based on your background, have you share with us the avenues to doing business international or working within large global firms and international financial organizations, which is where I know your expertise is.
Exactly. No, I mean, how exciting to hear about the kind of the student profile here at the
Yes.
university. I mean, it's a very enriched environment, right,
Yes.
with the international students.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, yes, I was a consultant for 15 years, working for a boutique international consulting firm, very exciting work. And that experience opened up doors,
Sure.
led to my job now at it's a multinational manufacturer of medical equipment called Philips from the Netherlands, very well-known company. And so I certainly attribute the experience at the consulting firm leading directly to my employment at a multinational firm.
Wow, yeah.
And it's been a wonderful ride, a wonderful experience. I certainly recommend that career path. I love the international element of it. I know that's something that I have in common with the student body here
Yes,
as well.
yes.
And that's part of what fueled my passion, right, to pursue this sort of work. I knew that I didn't want to have when I got into consulting, I didn't want to exclusively center on the U.S., right? I was living in the U.S., I had lived overseas, but I really wanted something that gave me exposure to different countries, different regions, different sectors.
Yes.
And that was that exceeded my expectations, right?
Wow.
And so now that I've been at Philips now for a year and a half, and I'll just tell you, like, I absolutely love it. I can get into 10 different reasons why it's a phenomenal place to work.
But I love that this is this is probably the third or the fourth time that you've said that. And every time you talk about Philips, right, in the few times that we've spoken since you started, you have just a glow, right? I can tell that you love working for Philips,
Right.
and that's excellent. We need someone like you talking to our population. You get up every day and you look forward to doing what you want to do. So I'm excited that you would bring your story to us.
I mean, we dedicate so much time to our work that we have to be in a place where we're passionate,
Absolutely.
where we believe in the values of the organization,
Absolutely.
we trust the people around us, we like the people around us.
Yes.
We believe in what the company does, right? I believe, Philips, we make among the world's best medical equipment. We have a mission to improve the lives of 2.5 billion people by 2030, including 400 million underserved people, right? So we have a very kind of social kind of mindset.
Corporate social responsibility.
Exactly.
Yes,
and we are a carbon-free company, so we take the environment very seriously. There's diversity in our teams. I mean, I work with people from around the world of all backgrounds, languages, and it's wonderful. I mean, today I was on a call. We're doing projects in Bosnia, right? And then, I was researching a project in Brazil. And, last year I went to Moldova in Eastern Europe. And I'm doing a lot of work in Indonesia. So, I mean, it's exciting. It's like, like you said, I wake up and I'm energized. I pinch myself to be like, is this real? Because
that's awesome.
Because when they say it's cliche, but when you find something that you love, it doesn't feel like work.
When you get to wake up and live your passion, right? Get to wake up and live your passion. It's interesting because when I'm in the classroom and I'm teaching, I always tell my students, the day that you wake up and you no longer like what you do, it's time for change, right? The day you wake up. And so that means that change should look like what you present when you come to us. Since you've said it, it's like you have a glow when you talk about, and this is not to blow up Philips, the company. The point is just to put a light on just your excitement, right, in being a professional and working within an organization that you love to work for, profiling the opportunities that you have to be connected to an organization that gives back socially, that's socially responsible, right? So tell us. Working for Philips, it's a global company, and I certainly, not to diminish Philips, but remember I asked you a little while ago, is that Philips when we see the light bulb? And you said yes, but they have sold that off. And I say that because it just gives us context. Most of us know the name because, we'll go to the store and we'll buy a light bulb, or we bought a laptop, or we bought a TV. And so just to give some context, it's that Philips, they've sold off those units, and now I think you've said it's strictly about the medical piece.
Exactly. So, I mean, Philips has a long legacy, right? It's a company that was founded about 130 years ago in southern Netherlands, right? And so initially the first products they made were light bulbs, right? So they weren't, Philips was very good at innovating, improving processes and technologies that existed. I mean, we have invented other processes, but, for example, light bulbs we didn't invent. We just got good at making them. And then started to make them on a large scale. So there's, over the years, I mean, Philips has done a ton of different things, right? I mean, you'd be surprised. They were involved in the invention of the CD.
Really?
They had, you mentioned your radio. Our listeners who maybe come from Latin America will remember Philips radios, or Philips, like you said, the TVs or the irons, some of the electrodomestic stuff. So a lot of that has been spun off and sold off. We're now about 20 billion euros a year company, so we're a big player. We're one of the top 4 medical device companies. So when you go to a hospital, if you look, you're going to see it's going to be either Philips, General Electric,
Okay.
Siemens. Those are kind of the biggest players.
Okay.
And I even had, a personal, my daughter had to have an emergency surgery in her ear. It's been over a year. She's all good now.
Okay.
Thank you. But I'm in there and like I see the patient monitors are Philips. And so it really hits close to home where it's like the company I work for, we make things that are very important for the well-being of people, right? And I know we had, when my wife was pregnant, we had ultrasounds done, and they were on Philips ultrasounds, which are, side note, manufactured in the U.S.,
Sure.
which is a source of pride for me,
Yeah.
but also like outstanding technology.
Wow.
So, in a lot of ways, it makes me realize how fortunate I am to be working for a company whose mission I believe in, whose products I stand by.
And so with that, working for Philips, you work specifically within the government component of Philips and with international financial organizations.
You got it.
Give us more about that, Daniel.
I am on what is known as a government affairs team, or government and public affairs, we call it at Philips. So government affairs is, what is government affairs? So most multinational companies have like a government affairs team because governments are big clients usually, right? So even if you're working for a service provider or manufacturer, whatever it is, governments contract a lot of things, right? So and in healthcare, that's no different, right? So the VA hospitals, for example, that's our largest client.
Really?
And so VA hospitals a lot of them are. They have equipment from other manufacturers as well. Sure. But we have a large footprint in there.
Wow. And
so
I use the VA, so I'm going to pay attention next
when
time.
you look, if you have, hopefully you don't need scans or anything like that, but when you do, you'll see they're potentially Philips.
Okay.
So on the government affairs team, there are really kind of three areas, I'll say. There's one, what we call B2G, business to government. That's like sales, right? And that's where I fit in.
Okay.
There's also policy. So there may be like new policies around the use of AI, artificial intelligence for medical equipment, or some other element of regulatory and policy. Those people are somewhat different because they're not pursuing sales per se. They're trying to influence or inform policy or have new policies developed.
Now, are those the lobbyists?
And then there's lobbyists would be the third.
Okay.
So the lobbyists, because lobbyists are registered, and they. So I kind of have them in their own area because not. Like government affairs, U.S., we have a lobbyist, but in other countries, we may or may not, where depending on where that's all permitted, right? And so I'm on the sales piece, government, B2G, business to government, and so I work on, when you said the international financial organizations, that's my wheelhouse. That's where I am an expert. Those are like the banks, like the World Bank or the Inter-American Development Bank. So I have to know where these banks, where their monies are going to be invested to modernize healthcare, and because those projects represent opportunities for Philips. And of course, it's a competitive process, so we have to bid to win the contracts. But if we know 2 years in advance, 3 years in advance, we can create strategies. We can get close to the customer to understand what their needs are, what their vision is, and we can feed into sometimes that vision, right? So that would increase our probability of success. It doesn't guarantee anything, because at the end of the day, we say you sharpen your pencil, you put your best bid forward, and sometimes you win, sometimes you don't.
Sure. All right. So just to make sure I'm clear, and our listeners are on point with us. So international financial organizations, you work directly with those companies, and I would imagine then that when they have forecasts, they put out forecasts, you are on top of the forecast for those organizations because it's telling you, whether it's the IMF, whether it's the World Bank, they're telling you, I guess, the dollars that they anticipate spending in a particular area, med tech area, right? The medical arena, right? And so you've got to stay tuned to that so that if and when an RFP, I'm guessing it's an RFP process?
It is.
Okay. So if and when an RFP comes out, you know that you'll bid, but as you've said, you already know what segments or what sectors they're looking to really spend dollars. Is that correct, Dan?
Exactly.
Okay.
So you understand it. You're right. At the end of the day, like the World Bank, for example, which is the largest international financial organization for these sort of development projects. And I also mentioned the Inter-American Development Bank. So that's like a regional bank, very similar processes, but that bank operates only in Latin America and the Caribbean. There's an African Development Bank, an Asian Development Bank, and so on. So these are organizations that are funded by the member countries. And so the United States, for example, contributes to the banks. They contribute tax dollars, right? So these are all public monies that are going from the banks to the ministries of finance in those countries, and then to the Ministry of Health when it's a health modernization project, for example. And you're right. So like I have to know of all the projects that these guys are funding. There might be 100 health projects. I have to know these are the 5 that we care about.
Yeah.
And I have to have them on the radar. We have to be there early. And we want to have strategies built around
and
these.
some of those can be here in the U.S., right? Anywhere.
I live here, and my office is in Washington, D.C., and the organizations like the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank are headquartered in Washington.
Sure.
But all my projects are outside of the U.S.
Wow.
So they are only in developing countries.
Emerging developing
markets.
Gotcha.
You got it.
Gotcha.
Those are the places I work.
And I just want to reiterate, you say only in emerging or developing countries. And so developed countries are not able to go after those kinds of projects or those dollars because we
eligible.
Don't qualify because of
Right.
the criterion, emerging or developing. Okay, interesting.
Generally,
Gotcha.
the developed countries are they're the contributing
I was gonna
members
say that,
of the banks.
Yes,
So like
yes,
the
gotcha.
U.S. or the Netherlands or Germany, they contribute
dollars,
dollars
billions
to
or
these
trillions
banks, and then these
of
banks, it's billions.
Okay.
Maybe someday I hope to get to trillions. That would be
Okay,
something.
okay.
But we can always aspire. So, but the countries that receive the loans are countries that are developing, right?
Sure.
So throughout Latin America, the Caribbean, Africa, Southeast
Absolutely.
Asia, South Asia, parts of Eastern Europe, Central Asia. So it's a lot of variety.
Yeah.
Exciting places, dynamic markets. Some are challenging.
Yeah.
But they certainly need the development assistance, right? And these institutions are, they add a lot of value, right? And so they certainly help the countries advance.
Awesome. And so as we talk about then the international financial organizations, they're about how many? Is it like a small number of them? I know it's the World Bank, the IMF.
About 10 of them or so.
Okay, so there are 10 of them that are like at that level of giving or of financing projects on a global scale.
Right.
Okay, so there are 10. And so are those organizations, Daniel, that do they hire much, or I guess the question is, do they hire from local, or are there are a lot of their employees expats, or like how do they hire?
Right, great question. So they do hire because so if we talk about, I'll stick to like I think the most relevant ones for probably the listeners in our community here.
Okay.
So the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank. They actually both have like, I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but they have like young professionals programs. So they're hiring, people that graduate from universities or grad schools.
Okay.
It's a pretty competitive process, so a lot of them are probably from grad schools.
Okay.
They do have certain quotas on nationalities. Okay. So if you are foreign, I believe you actually you could have an advantage. There might be more opportunities, right? So because I was I'm American and I used to live in Washington D.C. and at some point in my career I wanted to consider working for one of the banks. I'm very happy where I am, and I guess doors don't open for a certain reason, but I knew at that point with the criteria, with the some of the quotas that it was. I was up against it. Was a very competitive, we'll say. So I think students, like you say, international students, depending on where they're from, I think could really have a good shot at some of those
Okay.
jobs.
Okay.
You know, through the young professionals kind of window. The jobs would generally be based in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
But the banks have country offices as well. So they like people to kind of rotate. So it's a few years in Washington, D.C., and then they go to, the country office in, I don't know, Lima, Peru, or Buenos Aires, Argentina, or wherever it may be. And I know it's an exciting, rewarding career.
I can imagine.
Yeah, so
I can imagine. And so if I think about, Atlantis University and our students, right, and if this were something you and I were sitting down and talking to them about, I guess we would say, start with the application, but certainly ensure that they know it's a very competitive process. And so does the whole Ivy League thing, it's not necessary that you've got to be from a particular school, or should you?
I'll say, look, it certainly helps having a certain profile.
Okay.
There are certain grad schools that have historically, like SAIS, which is Johns Hopkins. It's like the School of International Development or something along those lines. But SAIS, I know they produce a lot of folks that go into to the World Bank and so on. So, I think what's important is, think about the academically kind of the areas that you're studying, like finance, international affairs, or international business. That's certainly very important. I'd say secondly, familiarize yourself with these institutions.
Yes.
They're I'm not totally up to speed, but I know they have certain kind of recruiting openings, and you can possibly visit or kind of try to make some inroads. But be aware of what the institutions do, how they work. Kind of demystifying, right, what they are. That would help. So, I would say, but I know people that have worked in these organizations are very good jobs. I think they compensate very well. It's very, it's exciting. I know. Some of these people live in very interesting places, right? And so if that is appealing to to the listeners, I'd say, look into it, right?
Yeah, and so. Interestingly enough, I spoke about, we have a large international body here. Some of our students will go back to their countries, right? And some will go to other countries. But with, say, just international, the IADB, I think it is, and the World Bank. Real quick, is the IMF a part of that? Does the International Monetary Fund fall up under
It's sort of a sister organization of the World Bank.
Of the World Bank, yes.
But they operate more on like a macro level, and they do provide assistance to certain countries. But the World Bank, I'm less involved like the IMF. On the World Bank side, that's where they actually finance specific projects. So they could provide, I don't know, country X in Latin America with $500 million. These are loans generally. In some cases, they're grants depending on the development kind of profile of the country. And then just like a mortgage, right? The countries pay back the loans. And so, that's kind of how they work. So I'm really more focused on the World Bank side on the project, the specific projects.
Okay. And so I said, before we started, I said I want to talk about Daniel Updegraft and just, where you are today, the excellent career that you have, coming from consultant to director now, still working with large international organizations, just in a different capacity, more intimate, probably a bit more travel. Do you have more travel as the director as opposed to the consultant, Daniel?
There is more travel because, I do go to like Washington, D.C. a lot. That's where my office is. I go about once a month. The Netherlands, sometimes to the location of the projects that I'm working on. Sometimes we have delegations that we take to Boston. We have a customer experience center up in Boston. That's kind of our U.S. headquarters, if you will. So there is travel. I think it's about the right amount. I think my wife would say do a little bit less, maybe, but it is still exciting.
Understood. And so, and I'm glad you talk about travel. Are there any opportunities for whether it's our listeners, our students, to visit any of the I guess the financial organizations, right? The large financial organizations, they have headquarters in D.C. Are there any local offices here? And I'm thinking about, potentially pairing that subject with the course, right? So
Right.
whether it's our international strategic management course or our leadership and org behavior course, our finance course is something along those lines. What do you?
Yeah, so unfortunately, my understanding is there's no presence here. I mean, some of these organizations have had events here right before COVID.
Yeah.
The World Bank's private sector arm had its global health conference at a hotel in Miami Beach. It was super convenient for me.
I remember that.
There was some talk about the Inter-American Development Bank's private sector arm opening up something here, but I don't think that happened. I mean, really to see the institutions, I mean, you can certainly go and visit them.
Sure.
For example, the spring meetings are coming up the week of April. I think it's like the week of the 18th or something like that of April. I have to look at the calendar. But like in a few weeks, registration opens up. It's free to register. You could go, you can sit in. They have different sessions about whatever topics of interest, and it's about 4 or 5 days.
Is this all of the banks or certain of the banks?
It will be the World Bank and the IMF.
Okay.
So they basically like block off, because they're right next to each other in DC.
Okay.
And they block off everything around there. You get a badge, and you're able, once you clear security, you can go from one building to the other.
Sure.
And they have interesting discussions about, I don't know, like macroeconomic trends in sub-Saharan Africa, or there was a lot of stuff on COVID or health resiliency. There could be stuff on artificial intelligence and development. So there's all sorts of topics. It's not specific to healthcare. Anything that's healthcare, I'll be there. But there's other topics: transportation, agriculture, education. And people, observers from all over the world, they register. You have to pay your fare, your airfare up there, ticket and hotel and whatnot. But you could sit in, and I think it's great exposure. If somebody's interested in these organizations, part of that is I mentioned the demystifying. What do they do? Because everybody has heard of the World Bank, right? It's very, very large. They have 10,000 employees, but like, what exactly is it? And if you're going to be knocking on their door, trying to get an interview, trying to or maybe an internship or I don't something. Understanding what they do,
yes, for sure,
it makes a big difference, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And so, all right, I don't want to miss anything. I want to get as much information as I can out of you. So we've talked about who you are, what you do. We've talked about the large financial organizations. You've said that there's about 10 of the largest. I know here on the screen, I was speaking with our producer about, I told him that I wanted him to put up the top 50, I think the top 50 largest global companies. And so we've got here on the board, not necessarily the 50, but based on market cap, right? We've got, so Apple, number one, Microsoft, NVIDIA. What I was trying to see, and okay, it moves, how many global, right, or how many foreign companies is on the list, and not as many. Is it because we did not capture any foreign? Oh, Aramco. Yes. Okay, Aramco is on the list. Now Eli Lilly, I think, also is international. Is that correct? Angel, I think Eli. Okay,
I'm not totally sure, but
I think Eli Lilly. So we've got a couple of them that are foreign, but for the most part, if you look at the top 20, the top, at least the top 40, top 50, I think the U.S.-based companies really galvanize that space. But this is excellent. So that's what I wanted to do, just have a conversation with you about global markets, right? Large international organizations, large international financial organizations, because that's your expertise. What we should be looking at, like if I'm trying to encourage a student or encourage someone, right, even outside of academia,
Right.
to enter that segment or just provide guidance. And so I like that you've talked about that. And I mentioned a field trip. Maybe one day that's something that we will look at doing, offering our students
Right.
that opportunity. A lot of our students come from other countries because they want the experience here.
Right.
And I think certainly being able to go and sit in a meeting at the IMF or at the World Bank would be, just an opportunity of a lifetime.
It certainly is. I mean, you never know. I mean, you'll bump into a minister of finance from a
Yeah.
certain country,
Yeah, wow.
or maybe a president, or
Wow. Yeah.
it is remarkable. I mean, one other thing I think I'd say, I understand, the audience listening is global.
Yes.
There's probably a good number from the university. I mean, I am a huge advocate of internships,
Yes.
right? I mean, when I was a consultant, we had interns on a regular basis, some of whom stuck around, were hired. I mean, it's an awesome way to get your foot in the door.
Sure.
At Philips, we have an internship program with some universities in the Netherlands, right? And they have kind of like management rotations. They come in for 2 years, and then they rotate. They have 3 kind of positions within Philips in those 2 years, and most of them end up staying on.
Wow.
That's kind of a paid program. There's
Yeah.
a salary. We don't have anything yet for Philips in the United States in that regard.
Okay.
But I mean, I keep bringing it up to our government affairs North America team that we're going to need. I would like to have an intern. We're going to kind of flesh that out a little bit.
Good.
But just conceptually, I would encourage the students to think about that, right? Because that really gives you a leg up on the competition when you're going to be when there's a job opening,
for
right?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Wow. Well, Daniel, again, thank you. You did not disappoint. Let's just say that. I'm sure our producer would agree. You did not disappoint. I so appreciate you coming back and sharing with us. I mentioned to you before, a little earlier before we started, I don't know if maybe we should look at a series, right, where we can present, have you come and talk and share. But we'll talk about that even more.
Fabulous.
And so for those of you that have been so gracious to tune in and to listen to us or to watch this segment, we so appreciate you. We've had in the studio with us Daniel Updegraft, right, an international guru, right, working with Philips. And so Daniel has been able to impart with me and amongst our students just really good information. And so whether it's dealing with consultancy, and as today you've heard, whether it's working within large organizations, financial organizations in particular, he's been able to share that with us. And so we thank you for thinking enough of us to join us on today, and we look forward to seeing you during our next segment. Again, I am Dr. Miya Burt-Stewart. Thank you from AU Studios and Atlantis University.